Hello, movie lovers. Welcome back to SignaMovie channel. Today is all about fresh cinema experiences, and I can't wait to share my thoughts on the newest film making its mark. Sit back, relax, and let's dive into the recap of this exciting cinematic adventure. The movie begins at night in the official residence of the American president. President Benjamin Asher trains in boxing with his bodyguard Mike Banning. Mike is the captain of the Presidential Guard and has a very close relationship with the president and his family. Soon another bodyguard named Dave Forbes arrived. He reminded the president that there was an upcoming fundraising event that the president must attend. President Usher and his family then prepared to leave for the event. His wife's name was Margaret and his son's name was Connor Asher. They went with a group of presidential guards. President Usher was in the car with his wife, and Mike was in the car with the president's son Connor. At that time, travel conditions were not very good due to the snow season. A few minutes later, the president's car suddenly fell off the bridge. Before he fell, his car skidded and got stuck on a bridge. The president was not injured, but his wife was seriously injured and had difficulty getting out of the car. President Usher asked some of his bodyguards to rescue his wife first. However, there are conditions that make it impossible to save them both, so Mike decides to save only the president. Finally, the president's car crashed with his wife inside, and President Usher's wife died in the accident. 18 months later, Mike is seen starting his morning routine. He narrowly escaped with his life, but the incident still haunts him. Before his job, he chats with his boss at a cafe called Jacobs and then meets with his old friends as the president's bodyguard. It turns out that Mike was unable to protect the president, and he quit as the president's bodyguard. He was transferred to the Treasury Department, not far from the White House. In the next scene, President Usher meets at the White House in Washington, D.C., with Prime Minister Lee of South Korea. He came with his chief bodyguard, Mr. Park, and several of his associates. They entered the White House and began meeting with the President of the United States and some of his cabinet members. During the meeting, Lee discussed how the North Korean state continues to violate its borders without permission. They talked about taking action together. Meanwhile, an unidentified aircraft enters the U.S. no-fly zone. 2 U.S. military aircraft followed the aircraft and issued a strict warning. But, unexpectedly, foreign aircraft actually abandoned their sophisticated weapons. They attacked 2 military planes until they exploded. Finally, 2 military planes crashed. When the Presidential Guard learned of this, they rushed to protect President Usher and immediately took everyone attending the meeting to the White House underground bunker. Meanwhile, the building security guards immediately drew their weapons and prepared for another terrorist attack outside the building. Shortly after, foreign aircraft began approaching the White House in Washington, D.C. Get closer. The plane immediately opened fire on civilians near the White House. Mike accidentally spots a foreign plane and rushes to the White House to check on the situation. He realized that something was wrong at the White House. We witnessed foreign aircraft approach the White House and open fire on security personnel near the White House, killing many security personnel. Shortly thereafter, the foreign aircraft was attacked by a military aircraft and the foreign aircraft was successfully neutralized. An unidentified plane explodes and slams into a monument in Washington, D.C., shattering it and falling onto several people nearby. Mike, who was there at the time, was shocked by the explosion of a nearby city bus. Then he saw a group of people intentionally blowing themselves up outside the White House gates. They looked like terrorists trying to break into the White House. Mike sees them quickly wrestling with guns in front of them and attempts to break into the White House. However, the terrorists soon bombarded the building's courtyard with numerous bombs. Moreover, they shot the guards very brutally. Mike tries to help the guards fight the terrorists. After destroying the White House gates, the group of terrorists quickly entered the White House courtyard and opened fire on presidential guards who were nearby. Back in the bunker, the president attempts to contact the Pentagon, awaiting information on the situation outside the White House. Immediately after that, the Korean customer suddenly attacks several people inside the underground bunker. Mr. Park, the head of the South Korean Prime Minister's bodyguard, points a gun at President Asher. The ringleader of the terrorist group was Mr. Park, and surprisingly, the head of the Presidential Guard, Forbes, was found to be an accomplice. They had planned the incident very carefully. Meanwhile, some of the guards remained outside the bunker, trying to repel the terrorists who'd already entered the building. However, they were killed due to the large number of terrorists, and the terrorists went on to invade the White House in just 72 hours. Military and police support had already arrived near the White House, but they quickly took control of the building. After successfully infiltrating the White House and taking the American president and cabinet members hostage, they contacted the Pentagon. And then all of a sudden, Mr. Park killed the Prime Minister and was watched by people at the Pentagon. There, he also took President Usher and his ministers hostage. He also called on the United States to withdraw its entire fleet from South Korea, including its aircraft carriers. He also called on you, soldiers, to leave the White House. Meanwhile, Mike Banning was already in the White House. He saw none of the White House guards alive. All the guards are dead, and the condition of the building appears to have been destroyed by a terrorist attack. Mike begins to strategize and storms into the surveillance room to turn off all the cameras. Inside the bunker, Mr. Park orders his men to find President Usher's son, who is still in the White House. Meanwhile, Mike comes up with a plan to get the president and other employees out of the bunker. At the Pentagon, U.S. spokesperson Alan Trumbull was appointed by law to serve as interim president to resolve this issue. Mike then contacts the Pentagon and informs them that he is the only surviving soldier there. Although they had doubts about Mike, Jacobs tried to convince Alan and eventually believed Mike, because Mike was the only hope to save the president. After deciding to trust Mike, Jacobs tells Mike about the situation in the bunker. She tells Mike what the terrorists want so he can adjust his strategy. Terrorist leader Park returns to the underground bunker and questions the president and minister about the Cerberus Code. The Cerberus Code is the code that governs all American nuclear weapons. This canon is divided into his three parts, and only the president and his two ministers are aware of this canon. It is not easy to negotiate with President Usher. However, with the Secretary of Defense's assassination imminent, the president is forced to provide the code to the terrorists. The first nuclear code has been successfully released. When people at the Pentagon learned of this, they immediately contacted Mike and requested immediate help. They asked Mike to quickly find the president's son Connor, who is still in the building, as the terrorists are blackmailing Connor so that President Usher will open his mouth and mention the final nuclear code. However, when Mike springs into action, Park and his men unexpectedly find that Mike himself is still being recorded on one of the active video surveillance systems. Park then asks Forbes to look for Mike, and Forbes begins searching for Mike's whereabouts. Unknown to them, Mike was acting faster to kill several terrorists. Armed with a former presidential guard, he was able to control a base within the White House. He also quickly discovered the president's son hiding behind the wall of the building. Mike quickly covered Connor and called the police outside the building to come pick him up immediately. And in the end, President Usher's son was saved. Hearing this, the Pentagon people now felt a certain sense of relief. There, Mike tries to track down the mastermind behind the attack. In the bunker, Park forces a presidential secretary named Ruth to reveal the second Cerberus Code. As she was being tortured, the president eventually ordered Ruth to give the code to Park, leaving President Usher with only one code. Outside, Forbes meets Mike. Mike still considers himself an old friend of the presidential guard. He believed that Forbes was the only person still living there. However, when Forbes mentioned the name of the terrorist mastermind, Mike became suspicious. He immediately attacked Forbes before Forbes could finish him off. Mike also learns that Forbes is involved in the crime. Mike uses his skills to kill Forbes on the spot and obtain information inside the bunker. At the Pentagon, the American military chief of staff was angry at Mike Banning's botched actions against the president. He then sent 5 Apache helicopters there. But the terrorist boss wasn't going to just stand there. President Park ordered his men to attack from the White House until 5 helicopters exploded and crashed. Mike was also shaken by the explosion. President Park was furious and killed one of his cabinet members in the underground bunker. He then asked for a helicopter to be flown from there. People at the Pentagon were immediately shocked and decided to give them a helicopter. They also hastily put headgear on those who remained in the bunker so that snipers would not be able to tell them apart when they all came out later. And when they boarded the helicopter and were ready to fly, the helicopter suddenly exploded. This shocked everyone as they thought the president was on board the exploding helicopter. Allen and the people at the Pentagon thought President Asher was dead, so there was no hope. However, surprisingly, the president and the terrorist mastermind were still in the underground bunker. The terrorist leader manages to obtain the president's Cerberus code using various threats and instantly activates the entire American nuclear code, which detonates everything. Then they hurried away from there. They blew up the back wall of the bunker to take out the president and some of his men. Mike Banning, who was already angry with him, immediately began eliminating them until only Park, the leader of the terrorists, remained. Eventually, Mike puts a knife to his head, killing Park instantly. Additionally, Mike quickly disables the Cerberus code upon receiving orders from the Department of Defense. In doing so, he finally tamed nuclear power. He saved the American people and the rest of the world from imminent danger. And he saved the president and stormed out of the White House. And the movie ends here. Thanks for watching our video. If you enjoyed this film recap and want more, subscribe now, like, and share captivating stories with your friends. Tell me which movie you'd like me to summarize next. See you soon.